Liberate IT is an Oracle NetSuite solution provider that has been servicing Australian and New Zealand companies since 2011.
So first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving up your time. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we do get going. The session is being recorded today, so you will receive a copy of it, of the recording, when we email it out to you this afternoon. And also any questions that pop up through the webinar, do feel free to put them in the Q&A box on your Zoom account. And if we don't get to answer them today, we will make sure that we will answer them and send those answers to you via email after the webinar. So once again, thank you very much for attending today and welcome. My name's Jenna Orr. I am a business specialist here at Liberate IT. So my job actually involves talking to people every day like yourselves who are starting to have a look at what implementing an ERP system like NetSuite could look like in their organization. But what we found is one of the main concerns that does pop up when I am talking to people is really around the process of that implementation. So many people have tried to implement an ERP before, it hasn't gone to plan, they might feel a bit burnt and are scared it's going to happen a second time, which is understandable. Or people are just not aware of actually what's involved in implementing something like an ERP. And even just don't even know really where to start. So Cairns has given us the opportunity today to really showcase some of our industry experts and just have a chat with all of you about what's involved when undertaking something like an implementation. We're going to highlight things to avoid and what to do when you see things potentially going off the rails. But firstly, who is Liberate IT and why would you kind of listen to us? So Liberate IT is a leading partner of NetSuite, and we specialise in implementing and supporting NetSuite to customers across ANZ. We've been a dedicated partner for the past 11 years, so it's safe to say we do know what we're talking about when it comes to implementation. We've done everything from large transformational projects through to implementing NetSuite for well-known technology companies, and then also right down to helping small family-run companies who possibly have outgrown Xero, set them up for their growth and ambitions and to able to achieve their set goals. So I am joined today by three industry experts. We've got Leanne, Kane, Rebecca, Paul, and certainly last but not least, Paul Matthews. So first of all, Leanne. Leanne is a CA who in a previous life held senior financial roles, including CFO roles in a number of sectors. Leanne leads the delivery for all of our NetSuite implementations here at Liberate IT. Then we've got Rebecca. Rebecca's actually been through an implementation at her previous role as a direct end user. She is the master user of our own NetSuite account here at Liberate, and she's currently the lead solutions architect and operations manager at Liberate IT. So she's a busy woman. And then we've got Paul. Now, Paul has delivered well over 100 ERP implementations in his career to date. So alongside with NetSuite, he has previous experience in MYOB, in Greentree, and some other large ERP systems over in Europe. So it's safe to say our dear Paul Matthews definitely has a lot of experience and knows what he's talking about there. So that's who we're joined with today. So let's really get into it. So to properly identify issues, manage risk, and plan for a successful implementation, we first need to understand the process of an organizational-wide tech implementation. Most of us here, I'm assuming here, will be aware that implementing something like NetSuite is going to be very different to maybe an on-premise or to something smaller like a Xero or a MYOB implementation. So with over 130 customers using NetSuite, Liberate IT would like to say has perfected the ERP implementation methodology. So I'd first like to ask Rebecca. Rebecca, can you talk us through Liberate IT methodology and why it works so well?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jenna. So Liberate IT recommends a shared approach to our implementations. Our philosophy really is around sharing the knowledge, sharing the configuration, and sharing the process design at every stage of the implementation. A shared approach means that you gain an understanding of NetSuite, the configuration, the processes, and you can truly own and support your system. We believe that implementing ERP is about merging two knowledge bases. Firstly, it's our consultants who have an in-depth knowledge of NetSuite configurations, NetSuite best practice, and industry-leading practices. And secondly, your team. Your team has an in-depth appreciation of your business and the business processes. Our implementation consultants recommend leading practices in NetSuite, and so where those practices need to deviate from standard, us along with your team will help to design new processes. And we transfer the knowledge, NetSuite knowledge and process knowledge along to your project team. So it really is about a collaborative approach.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. So it definitely sounds like it's not some kind of lone wolf approach, so to speak. You can't just have one person take on such a project. So I guess the next question from that would be, from each of your perspectives, who needs to be on a project team? Who are we looking out for?
So I guess from my perspective, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. From my perspective, kind of being on the ground, if you like, within an implementation, we'd like to have what we would call is a Netsuite Champion. So the Netsuite Champion is someone within the organization. Looking in my experience, it can be a range of people, a range of where that person comes from within the business. But the best ones tend to be the ones that have worked there for a while and understand the business kind of well. I wouldn't say inside out, that's a bit extreme. So they're the person within a business who's really going to drive the implementation, own the implementation, and also to a degree sell that implementation internally. And that's just on the back of what Rebecca was talking about, transferring all that knowledge in the first instance to that person. So NetSuite Champion, that's my selling point there.
And I guess from my perspective, it would be the subject matter experts from the various departments within your organisation. Whilst they won't be dedicated to the project full-time, their input is invaluable. They're needed to assist with designing processes, making decisions on behalf of their departments, and then towards the end of the project, they're involved in the process testing.
And then to follow on from that, I think that at my level, we like to see a project sponsor that's in the leadership group. So really that person is there to help with the transformation and the change management throughout the business. They're there to help unblock things in terms of decision making and kind of sanctioning process redesign. But really they're the people that are going to govern the entire project and work together with our governance team to make sure that the project's mapped through and delivered successfully.
Okay, great. So some of you might be sitting out there thinking, I don't have all of those people just mentioned in my staff, and that's okay, and that's quite common. So what we tend to recommend there is you can treat that as the dream scenario, but you want to start looking at people who can wear multiple hats, So if this resonates with your business, try to start looking at what different staff members could bring to the project team. They might not necessarily have the titles that were just mentioned, but they might have the skill sets. So Rebecca, how important are things like skill sets and even personalities when it comes to choosing your project team?
Yeah, well, look, finding the right project team is crucial, and it can often make or break an implementation project. The types of skill sets and personalities that we look for are people who can adapt to change, but actually like to challenge the norm. They want to challenge the current business processes. And those really who want to take ownership and accountability for the project. You want a team who's organised, who has, strong communication skills, but also very much a quick learner. And I guess lastly, they need to be excited for the new project. This is a huge change for the business, and you want people who are excited and really enthusiastic, because that's great for the project, but it's also great for your change management because people feed off that energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Paul, can you have a successful implementation or any project really that impacts your organization without an in-house project manager?
Well, I guess the short answer is yes, you can. It does become challenging. I mean, what we've found again from my experience is like smaller implementations, you can leverage the use of someone like Liberate to help with that and help guide you through it. But really for a larger implementation or a larger company that involves many aspects of the organization, you really need someone in-house who has dedicated time to help manage, and again, what Rebecca was saying about that change management side of things. So the short answer is yes, but ideally no, if that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Leanne, do the roles of the CFO and even the operations manager, have you found that they actually change during the implementation project?
What we like to say is that they pivot, and we want them to oversee the process design. We want them to be ahead of all the communication and the business transformation and the change management, but we really don't want them involved in the project day to day. Some projects where there perhaps might be a smaller team, you find that sometimes the general manager, who also is the shareholder, wants to be involved in the project on a day-to-day basis. They want to have all of the processes route through them. They want to kind of have quite a heavy controlling focus. Sometimes that is good for getting all of the knowledge of how the business actually works in terms of us understanding all the business processes, but they're also probably the busiest person of everybody, and we don't want to have blockages because they're involved kind of too much.
Yes.
So we really want them at a steering, decision making, unblocking when we're finding things that decisions need to be made or that aspects need to be kind of pushed through, but really we just want them to pivot to promoting and sponsoring the project.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. So we've just talked on who needs to be involved in these types of projects. So if we start to have a look at some of the red flags that might pop up, we'll set the scene. We've decided to undertake an organizational wide project like implementing NetSuite, for example. Rebecca, as the operations manager, what stands out for you as a red flag, I guess you could say, that a project is in a bit of a distress?
Yeah, well, look, there are really obvious red flags, such as, when project tasks are slipping behind, goals aren't being completed by, the required timeframes. Availability of resources, so often people dedicated to the project are being pulled off the project, but other areas of the business are no longer available onto that project. Those are the really obvious ones, but there are often a lot of subtle red flags, and some of those are around slow decision making, and often this can cause a lot of pressure on timelines, especially if those timelines are really tight. Other red flags are things like a lack of priority within the business or around that leadership group and the project's sponsorship. So the project needs to be a priority for the business. And so when we often say that there's a lack of priority, those are often quite, red flags. We also notice that when there's a lack of communication, and often that can the lack of communication can signal that something else is at play. Also, Another red flag is when we identify that a client wants to implement their legacy processes into new systems. A new ERP is an opportunity to simplify the business processes and align with leading practice. But often we see people clinging to their current way of doing things rather than taking this as an opportunity to redesign. Yeah, so I guess those are some of the very common red flags that we see a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And Paul, in your years of experience, is there any other red flags that you'd kind of like to add to what Rebecca's just mentioned there?
Well, I'm going to take quite a kind of simple approach, if you like, and quite often what we talk about is a triangle. So we like to think that we've got this nice, perfect shaped equilateral, I think, if I remember my maths days, equilateral triangle, where we've got nice even sides, and what we've got on that triangle is the 3 points. And what we talk about those 3 points is we talk about scope, we talk about time, and we talk about resources. So our perfect triangle should always stay as a perfect triangle, because if one of those things changes, this can affect your project. For example, somebody decides, oh, we suddenly need to change the scope and we need all this more complexity in there, or we need to reinvent the wheel of something. So that's going to affect our scope, but nothing else changes. So we still have to hit the same timeline and we've still got the same resources to this. So our triangle gets out of shape. And that's kind of a red flag to a project not having a good result.
That's a really nice way of thinking about it, with the balancing the triangle there. I like that. I guess, you know, a lot of those are quite common red flags, and I'm sure all of us today have probably been in some kind of projects where we have seen one or many of those pop up. Paul, I'll come back to you again. Could you highlight maybe some of the steps then that you go through or you take to get the project back on track, or to get that triangle looking good again?
Yeah. So, look, again, I'll keep it simple, but to me, it's all about communication, really. And look, we have some great tools about monitoring a project and some online tools. So, you know, tasks and statuses and down to that, you know, granular level of what's happening on a project. But if a project goes off, again, as you said, Jenna, about that triangle getting out of kilter, it's all about communication and just kind of saying, hey guys, we've got an issue here. And you have to sometimes, what's the phrase, rip the bandage off and just kind of talk about it and say, well, here's the impact, here's the knock-on effects. So best way to get projects back on is just to talk about it and get it out.
Yeah, like most things in life, communication.
Exactly.
Right?
Communication, exactly.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so I'm having a look at the poll that we did just before the webinar started. I can see that some of us here today are in that planning stage of a project, and some of us are actively putting together a business case for an ERP. Leanne, I'll come over to you. Is there anything that might make a leadership team a little bit hesitant about starting an ERP journey?
Look, I think, yeah, definitely it's quite a big decision for a leadership team to take on. It's a lot to put a business through. Businesses traditionally don't do it very often, probably once in 10 years, 10 or 15 probably. And really, it's understanding exactly what the impact's going to be on the team, the impact on the business, and perhaps learning from some of the things that might have happened. And you know, the past is always a good indicator of, you know, how not to do things. I guess the key thing is that, you know, in some cases, people might have had experience in a different business with a different solution, might have had a product that wasn't the right fit, might not have had the right resources on the team, you know, so all the things that we've already talked about in terms of the flags and things where projects can kind of go a little bit pear-shaped. But I guess the key thing is for a business, if they're in that point where they're looking to make this change for the business, is planning. And planning internally before you're going to market is quite important. Starting to get organized, thinking about your master data. It doesn't really matter what solution you're going to go ahead with. Your master data is always going to be something that's a little bit underestimated. It's not something that you can hire a third party to do for you. You know, if your data needs a big cleanse because it's got a lot of legacy things in it that perhaps don't need to be taken into a new system. You want to get somebody onto that as early as possible. Committing resources, and committing resources is really just around, you know, having a good budget that's going to be able to have a little bit of flex to it. Don't be locked down too much about a number. Put a bit of buffer into that so that you've got a little bit of room to move if there is a scope change. Looking at all your resources and working out who internally in the business would be ideal to be on the project. It might be part of a personal development pathway for one of your employees to be part of the project, and might be, you know, reorganizing your finance team or reorganizing your operations and procurement team. So really sort of a lot of that is just actually the planning for the business, regardless of what the actual solution is going to be.
Yeah, definitely. So there are quite a few, well, I've found anyway, talking to people that are just starting to open up this conversation, but there can be a lot of misconceptions around ERP. Paul, sorry, coming back to you, Paul. What are these common misconceptions that you hear when you meet with a customer project team before an implementation?
Yeah, look, you could probably write a long list, to be honest. But look, some of the common ones that come out, and it's a little bit layering on what Leanne just talked about, you know, oh, we did this 10 years ago and it only took 3 months. What do you mean it's now going to take, you know, 6, maybe 9 months? You know, our business hasn't changed. So it's kind of, yeah, but the world has changed, and, you know, you have to kind of think about that. And actually, have you still got the same resources and all that? And the system is quite different to how it, you know, you've just told us a long list of pains you've got, so we need to resolve those. So I guess sum it up by going, they haven't got a good idea about how long it's going to take. Yeah. And like anything, people underestimate it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Johnny can do it, and he's got a half a day a week. He can kind of squeeze some time in there. You know, oversimplistic, I know, but it's kind of that kind of approach about, oh, so-and-so's got enough time, they can squeeze it in. And this is an age-old mantra from me. Do not underestimate the amount of testing you need to do to work your way through it. Yeah. People who kind of know me go testing. Sorry, that's rather boring, but yeah. So again, it's an underestimation of what's required at the customer end to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially coming off, you know, a smaller system, or
yeah,
you know,
where things were quite rigid about how they did things. Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So look, there are a lot of steps to take, and a lot of areas where things can go off track. So let's kind of round things off on how to have a successful implementation. So we've highlighted the red flags, at what can go wrong, who needs to be involved, but kind of how do we ensure that our implementation is going to be a success for us? Here at Liberate IT, we help companies that need that all-in-one solution. Leanne, how would a senior finance person identify that their company needs to start considering an ERP?
Look, there's lots of reasons why people come to us looking for a change of their system. The first place to start is that in some cases, people might be using something that's quite an out-of-date or disparate system or systems, and disparate meaning that they've got something that's running manufacturing and something that's running finance, and they have to manually stitch the two together. So that gives, you know, really poor reporting, lack of visibility. You're not running a transaction end to end in one system. You've got it starting in one and finishing in another. It makes reconciliation difficult, makes the month-end close difficult. In some cases, the business is growing and finance is struggling to support it. And that might be because finance is, you know, really reliant on Excel. Excel is a super flexible tool, but if it's doing too much, and especially if it's doing things that are transactional and manipulating data, and basically it's involved in the end-to-end order to cash or purchase to pay, then it's just going to make somebody's job bigger when the Excel gets bigger, or that person goes on holiday, or it gets a bug in it. There's lots of reasons why Excel should be a smaller part of your finance toolkit and your ERP is doing all the heavy lifting. As I mentioned, if you've got a slow close, or if your overall IT infrastructure and the architecture that's being led by your IT team is moving to a cloud, then really it's a good time to basically start looking at perhaps if you've got an on-prem or you've got something that's a bit small for the business now and it's not going to help the business scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rebecca, what about how can the operations team or operations manager help to keep that project on track?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to three things. The first being resourcing, ensuring that the project is well resourced, that business as usual is well supported. So having a project team that can focus on the project, knowing that business as usual is still running as business as usual. I guess that's the first thing. The second thing is going back to what Paul has mentioned previously, is testing and training. A lot of, I guess, businesses underestimate the amount of training and testing that's required. And so making sure that the right amount of time is allocated to those and the right resources are available at the right time. So just supporting the business to make sure that those two things are being done. And then lastly is around change management. So making sure that there is a change management strategy and that it's understood by the business and then effectively communicated at the appropriate times. Again, change management is often overlooked, but implementing a new ERP is huge, and the change management piece is a big part of that as well. Just making sure that the right communication goes out to the right team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, that is definitely overlooked a lot of the time. And Paul, finally, what are your top tips? Make sure you get a successful implementation.
Top tips for a successful implementation. Again, I'll keep it kind of straight, simple, I guess, but it's kind of, look, the best implementations I have worked on are ones where it's a team effort, yeah, and that the business, the customer kind of takes the ownership of that from day one, and looping right back to the beginning where I talked about that NetSuite Champion, but someone that's kind of taking that ownership, pushing it out through the business, and there will be some kind of pain points, if you like, along an implementation because it involves people at the end of the day. So, but yeah, top tips. The business takes the ownership of it. It's not kind of someone else's system type thing. And again, repeating myself, communication between the partner and the company, and also internally, looping back to what Rebecca was talking about, change management there. But the best ones are where people get involved right from the beginning, take the ownership of it and drive it forward internally.
Yeah, great, because it's a really big commitment, but it needs to be a commitment company wide as
yes.
well.
Yep, for sure.
Or one poor person in the corner. Absolutely.
Yes, most definitely, Jenna, most definitely.
Hey, look, thank you guys. That nearly wraps us up. I've seen a few questions pop through, so we'll jump in and start to answer some of those now. First one I've got here. So my current ERP system is heavily customized. Is NetSuite an out-of-the-box solution, or is it also customizable? Paul, maybe?
Yeah, shall I take that one? Yeah, sure. So look, the short answer is yes. It is customizable, but part of my role is that we like to challenge you on kind of why are you doing this, and more often than not, I wouldn't say all the time, but more often than not, it's because their legacy system just couldn't do it. So they had to customize it or develop it. So it's part of my role to kind of go, why are you doing this? Are you sure? Let's give you some options. Let's give you how NetSuite can do it. Let's talk about what best business practice is, rather than just kind of let's just keep pushing square pegs into round holes because that's what we've always done type stuff. Sorry, I'm being oversimplistic again there, but the short answer is yes to whoever asked that question. Yes, NetSuite is customizable, but we would we always have a conversation around that and kind of why are you doing it this way? Can we give you some options?
Yeah, great. And let's see another one that's popped up. Oh, here's a good one. When is a good time to start an ERP? Is there ever a good time to start an ERP project? Leanne, maybe you want to take on this one.
After you've had a holiday. Look, I guess the key thing is that, you know, sometimes our customers' timing is driven by the calendar. Sometimes there's a natural off-peak period in the year for the business in terms of it might have some seasonality. But I guess regardless of what business you're in and whether you've kind of got a date that you're trying to drive towards, it's when you know your requirements and what you're trying to achieve. So again, it goes back to what I said earlier about the planning stage, is basically starting the project once a whole lot of internal work has actually already been done to get the business ready. What we like to do is that we design the timelines around to accommodate what the business needs, what's realistic, how many phases we might be using for the implementation. It might be that there's some quick wins to get it live early, but it doesn't have the full solution, and that comes in later phases and can be layered on afterwards. Or it might be that there's quite a long implementation period to get a lot of things done, so that it is literally turning off the old and turning on the new and getting everything on day one. But again, we always come to the table without a view around what the timeline should be, and basically take on board exactly what the customer needs to accommodate their timelines. So depending on when your busy period is, depending on whether you want to be live for year end or you want to start it after the auditors have left, all of those things can come into play and we can work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did touch on the phasing there, which we didn't touch through the other webinar, but we might write a little bit more about how we can phase projects, and that can sometimes be a better approach for some organizations. So we'll do something about that and send that out to all of you on the webinar. Another one that's come through here. How do I, this is one I get all the time. How do I resource an ERP implementation? Rebecca, I don't know if you want to...
I'll take that one. Look, as we've kind of, I guess, mentioned previous, it is best to resource the project team from within the business, as they bring with them an in-depth knowledge of the business, how the business operates. Again, it is important to ensure that those resources are well supported and their roles are backfilled. Ideally, from within the business, but also in cases where there aren't the natural project team, so there may not be a natural person who would wear the hat of a NetSuite Champion. Those roles can then be hired because you're looking for specific roles and they don't necessarily know how the business operates, but that's what your subject matter experts and the leadership team are there to provide, that additional support. So definitely don't be, I guess, hesitant in hiring for these roles, because the most important thing is that you have people dedicated to the project. So rather than trying to do, both their day job and also the project, we do need to make sure it is a priority. And if it's not someone within the business, hiring outside is the next natural way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a big commitment, which I think some people tend to overlook at times. Thanks, Rebecca. Oh, here we go. So you mentioned a NetSuite Champion. Does every project need a NetSuite Champion? Paul?
I guess that's me, because I talked about NetSuite Champion earlier on. So yeah, I mean, good question. Look, the short answer is yes. Every project needs a NetSuite Champion. I guess a little bit layered on what kind of, or picking up on that question that Rebecca kind of just answered there about resources as well, which is always that one that comes up, is kind of, you're going to have to layer in that NetSuite Champion within that, how you resource it. look, the reality is for a smaller implementation, the NetSuite Champion can sometimes carry on their day job as per normal. But that's quite a small implementation. But the short answer to the question is yes, you do need a NetSuite Champion, because remember that person also has soft skills, if you like, to bring into it, because they need to be out there selling it, encouraging people.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a little bit of a kind of sales motivational kind of aspect to that role. It's not just about kind of sitting there typing into NetSuite all day long. But yeah, you need a NetSuite Champion, most definitely.
Absolutely.
And after the project as well. Sorry, Gina.
No, I was just about to say that, Leanne, as well. Yeah.
Yeah. The NetSuite Champion, once you're live, is your first line of support.
Yes.
So they're actually a person whose role might have changed through the transformation in the business, but then they become the greatest knowledge of NetSuite within your business, so that they are kind of your help desk internally. What we want to be able to do is to leave you after your project so that you're self-sufficient, you're not heavily reliant on coming back to our support desk for day-to-day maintenance of your system. That NetSuite Champion is going to be able to do that going forward. And that dovetails in with the fact that we've done a lot of knowledge transfer for that person, and they really are a heavily skilled NetSuite user by the time you've got your project live.
Yeah, definitely. Just checking the time. I think what time for probably one more. Again, not to worry if we haven't got to your question. All of us on the panel here today will sit down and go through these and answer them, and we'll send you all the answers to these questions via email. My project is really off the rails. Should I start again with a new project team and or a new solution? Rebecca?
Yeah, Rebecca, you drew that one.
I'll take that one.
We haven't heard from you.
I guess the first stage in that is identifying what the cause of the problem is. Because then once we know what the cause is it a resourcing issue? That can be easily identified. Of course, no one wants to, scrap the project and start again or completely replace the project team. And often it's a subtle change can make a drastic effect to a project. So whether it's giving some more resources to someone to backfill their job, ensuring communication lines, or just unblocking those problems. So once we find out what those problems are within the project, then it becomes very easy to be able to rectify a project. But yeah, often we're not needing to make big, huge, drastic changes. And sometimes it's as simple as extending the timeline, pushing out that go live, because everyone, if you've got a tight time frame, what that does is it causes a lot of undue pressure and stress on that project team. And it can be as simple as extending those timelines.
Yeah. So just really focusing why it possibly could have gone off the rails in the first place. Try to identify that first, right?
Yeah, if it's the wrong fit, then probably you might be best to start looking at other solutions to see if you have got the wrong solution for your business or for your vertical. Generally, NetSuite as an ERP covers all the verticals you could possibly think of, so it has a lot of flexibility, and generally it's not the right fit in terms of when people might see that their project's not going well. It's more they're bringing the wrong processes and the wrong mindset. And so if you're bringing your legacy processes to your new implementation, then chances are you are back in that whole process of not taking the opportunity to be able to redesign and simplify how your business operates. You want the ERP to do everything it possibly can, and not be forced to do things the old way if you can help it.
Yeah, which can be hard to do. Us humans don't. That's what you've got to do sometimes to make things better. Hey, look, that concludes our webinar today. I just saw the time there. So as I said, I can still see heaps of questions coming through, which is awesome. And do keep them firing through. I'll keep the webinar open for another 5 minutes or so. So keep submitting those all in. We will answer those and get them out to you by the end of the week. Or actually, no, it's Thursday. Let's say next week. And also, obviously, we will be sending you all a copy of the recording today of the webinar. So look, thank you all once again. There's quite a few of you that have attended, so I really hope that you got something out of that. Also, if you are starting a project or even opening up that conversation, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to have just that initial conversation to see if ERP or NetSuite is going to be the right solution for you guys. But yeah, thanks once again. Thank you very much for attending and enjoy the rest of your day.
We hope this video gave you the information you were after. If you have any further questions, get in touch with us using the links in the description.